Yes. Hello, everybody. I'm so happy to see you all. I'm happy to see you in a great mood and ready to learn something new. Yes, we will do that this evening. But just so you know, this event is powered by Boost, and that is why I'm standing here. My name is Jivile. I work at Boost for almost 3 years now. And before we dive deep into learning, let me tell you a thing or two about Boost. So, and before that, could you raise your hands how many of you recognize this logo and already know Boost? Yeah, I maybe should ask who doesn't know Boost, yeah? So that is very nice to see that. Yes, Boost is Nordic department store. And here are some numbers, short in brief intro of Boost. So we have like 3 million customers, active customers. We operate in 14 markets. And we have 1,200 employees working at Boost. Yeah, but behind this amazing Nordic department store, we have tech department, which is called Boost Platform. You will shortly know more about that, but to tell you, we have this great slogan that you can see here that is power to the people, meaning that we, tech department, create tools that enable our colleagues. And who can tell better about our tech if not our CTO and co-founder, Jesper Brondum? So I would like to show you a short video where he will tell you by himself.
The Boost culture is fantastic. We have the values that we really believe in and have been living since day one. From platform point of view, we are even more lucky from the sense that we started a team from scratch. When I came in, there were nobody, so we actually could shape our own culture as we grew from nothing. We are born digital. We've been that since day one, and we are used to thinking in processes and automation, optimization and scalability, and being what we call an exponential company. So being able to be efficient with the people we have and the resources we have. We have always been, and we are still, extremely dynamic in our organization. Some actually call it an organism, not an organization. I think that's cool. So we are dynamic and we collaborate, but we are still fairly small in the way of thinking. And that's very much due to the startup mindset that we want to keep. An ideal platformer is dynamic, is okay with handling several things on the same time, is open and honest, both in giving feedback but also in receiving feedback, and is willing to try something new because we are going new paths.
Yes, that is true. Going new path, trying something new, and also sharing our knowledge is also something in our DNA. We do it in various ways, and as you can see in this picture, this is a picture of our annual event. It was 12 years in a row. We have platform conference, so we gather everyone for 2 or 3 days to share our knowledge, one among another. Yeah, and you can see here is Sadaf, who will join this stage shortly. But I thought maybe enough of me talking here. I brought some giveaways for you. Actually, it's the t-shirt that I'm wearing here. It's the t-shirt that everyone got during this platform conference, and I'm ready to give you 5 of them to those who will answer or will try to guess the answers to my questions. Should we start? Yes. So can anyone guess how many developers and engineers are here at Boost Platform? Maybe someone knows, maybe someone can just guess. 200? Yeah? Anyone else brave enough? 75? Yeah. You were closest, and we have 190 developers working at Boost, yeah? And I will give you your t-shirt right after the event, yeah? So please approach me. Okay, moving forward. The second question would be, Boost Platform is located in several locations, in several countries. can someone tell me how many tech hubs do we have? Or guess, or tell. 5? Yes? Yes, that is nice. We have 5. Our tech hubs are located in 5 locations. That is Malmö, Aarhus, Copenhagen, Poznan, and Vilnius, which is Sweden, Denmark, Lithuania, and Poland. Cool. Moving forward, as you have heard, we tailor-made our internal systems according to our needs. So when there is a need for something, we at Tech create that system that reflects our needs. So can someone guess how many of those internal tailor-made systems we have? 15, yes, someone else? 10, 30. Yeah, I think we can give t-shirt to you. We have 40 of them, internal systems, tailor-made. Yeah, you were closest. Cool, moving forward, 2 more to go, 2 chances to win. Yes, another thing that we are really proud of is our warehouse. We have a really huge one here in Sweden in Ängelholm. And there is huge auto store installation there. One of the biggest in the world. So can someone guess how big in the world it is? It is biggest, second biggest, third biggest, and so on. Second biggest, yes, I can hear. Someone else? Third biggest? I think we can give it to you because it is the biggest in the world auto store installation. Yes. So as I said, we share our knowledge internally with one another during platform conference, Fika talks. We go do it externally, going to conferences, to the meetups, and also we share our knowledge through written form. And we have our account on Medium platform. So can someone guess what is the name of our account? You have 2 hints on the slide. So, who's the first one? Boost Tech. That is correct, yes. So also you can check our LinkedIn account, which is Boost, and on medium.com, Boost Tech. Or you can scan this QR code and you will be directed right there. Fantastic. Those who won, please approach me. Those who did not, please find discount vouchers everywhere. And now I am more than happy to welcome on stage my colleague Sadaf. Please.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me properly? So, it's so nice to be here, to see so many new, familiar, and unfamiliar faces. Like Jivilia said, my name is Sadaf, and I'm a front-end developer at Boost. And today I'm going to have a small talk about React Query. Obviously, it's a pretty big library, and it has so many features, and we won't have time to cover it all. But we're going to talk about the most important ones, the ones that I found personally most useful, and we will try to see how that goes. But first of all, maybe a short introduction to me. Who am I? I hope the picture is self-explanatory with me holding a Jedi sword at Boost. I've been a front-end developer for almost 5 years now, and I've been at Boost for about 1 year and 3 months so far. I'm Persian, so to all my fellow Iranians, a warm greetings. Yes. I've been using React Query for a few of my own personal projects, and I'm here to share my experience with you today, hopefully. For a fun fact, I'm a big foodie and Harry Potter super nerd, so there's probably very few Harry Potter related facts that I do not know, just so you know. Now, enough about me. Let's get a little bit more technical. React Query. Is anyone here familiar with it, by any chance? Cool. I see a number of hands. Hopefully today you will be able to pique your interest a little bit more. What is React Query? It's a library that helps us with our data, basically, handling our data, fetching it, syncing it, basically just working with it. And like a lot of you already know, there is no one correct way to do this. There's so many different ways you can do it according to your own personal preferences or your project's needs. There's so many ways you can do this. But today, we're going to talk about how we can do it with React Query. Hopefully, it's going to be useful. Now, the million-dollar question. Why even bother with React Query? When I was using it, mostly out of curiosity in my own projects, just to poke around a little bit with it, see how it works, I found these pointers that I'm going to tell you about as good things to use this library. So these are good pointers and good reasons to maybe check it out. First of all, it has pretty good caching mechanism. We're going to talk about that in more detail a little further into the talk, so be patient. It works really well with server state, basically with our or asynchronous state. And because of its good caching mechanism, it eliminates a lot of extra re-rendering of our components, therefore can result in optimization and optimize our performance. That's also a good point. When you use React Query, you can have a very nice structure of your data fetching and posting, a very nice structure which you can reuse in all of your components and pages. I personally really like that. And another good thing is that it lets us know that when the data that we're using is out of date, or in React Query terms, they call it stale. We'll get to that later, but just know this. And a lot of times we might avoid using specific libraries or packages because they're such a pain to set up. Not this one, no. It doesn't have any specific configurations, which is also another good thing. And you can customize it according to your own needs, however way you see fit. So let's dig in. First of all, like I said, it works really well with server state or asynchronous state. Now, I know a lot of you are developers and a lot of you are front-end developers and probably already know this, so we'll just go through it real quick, the difference between our client state and our server state. Our client state is something we have within our client app, and it's accessed, updated, and exists inside our client application. For example, let's say if we have a button where we click and it opens a modal window, the state that controls whether this modal window is open or closed is a client state, obviously. And usually, by updating a client state, it results in a re-render of our components with the new state. Or sometimes changes in our storage, which could be local storage or session storage. Now, server state is usually placed outside of our client application, so it's somewhere remote. Therefore, we need APIs or endpoints to help us access it, or update it, or use them. And we may not be the only one who can have access to it. And because we may not be the only ones, other people can update it or change it without us knowing. Now, React Query works really well with server state, and this is what we're going to talk about today. So, like I said, it's easy to configure. Now, I'm going to show you how. I've provided a simple screenshot of my own project, one simple project that I did with React Query. As you can see, all we have to do is import the query client provider from React Query and just wrap our entire application within the query client provider, and it just needs an instant of the query client, also imported from React Query, passed on to it. And my friends, that's it. No other configurations. And another good point that it has is that it has React Query dev tools, which is similar to our browser's developer tools. It's basically like a console. But it's specifically tailor-made for React Query. It shows us all the available queries in our page, their state, whether they're active, inactive, stale, fresh, what's going on, and their data. And you can use that React Query DevTools when you're developing. And as a personal preference of mine, I prefer to have it always expanded and open and placed on the bottom right corner. It looks something like this. So imagine if this is your application. You can see this dark console here, and you can see like a number of queries happening in this page. You can see some information here, whether it's fresh, it's stale, and the data inside of the query. And if you want to see it in my own application, you can see a small React Query logo here. If you click, you'll be able to see this page. And if I move to the page that uses the React Query, this is basically what it looks like, and you can see the data inside of it. I'm showing a list of movies here, and basically each of this is one of the movies here. So pretty useful. Now the basic usage and the most useful things with React Query: fetching data, triggering it, and its callbacks. Let's talk about how we can do those. So basically, it provides us with something called the useQuery hook. And all we have to do is, as you can see in my screenshot here, I've used the useQuery hook. And you can pass 3 arguments into the useQuery hook. The first 2 are mandatory ones. The first one is your query key. Usually it's like a unique identifier, which helps you later access the query in your either React Query DevTools or in the cache. Now this is usually a string, but it can also be an array, and it can include extra information. We may come back to that later. This is a required parameter. The second one is our fetch function, which tells React Query where to fetch our data from. In this example, I'm fetching a list of movies. So you can see it's a fetch movies, and since in my own project I was running a local JSON server on my local host, it's sending a request there and fetching the list of movies. So these 2 parameters are the required ones. And the data that the hook later gives us, we can destructure it out of the hook. They're called the data, which is obviously the data. So in this case, it's the list of movies. I've named the key movies data because that's what it returns. It gives us a loading flag, which indicates whether the data is loading or it's loaded. It gives us another flag that tells us if an error has occurred while the fetch is happening. If this error flag is true, our error object will include information about our error, like the error code, the error message, everything. And there's also a refetch function where, because as of default, when you call a hook inside a component, it runs on the mount. So let's say if you want to rerun it again or re-trigger it, you can use a refetch function later. And there's some other extra things that you can destructure out of useQuery hook. There's quite a lot of them. But these are the ones that are the most basic ones and, in my opinion, the most useful ones. The third parameter, as you can see, is an object. It's called the configurations object. And it's an optional one because it comes with some of React Query's basic default values. If you provide certain information, again, it's a long list. You can put a lot of different configurations. And I'm going to tell you about some of the ones that I personally used and were like the most useful ones. For example, when you fetch some data, you may want to do something with the response if the fetch was successful. Or if it was unsuccessful, you may want to show an error toast and say something went wrong. In that case, if you want to have like success or error callbacks, there are 2 values present in the configs object called onSuccess and onError. You can assign your handler functions to them, as you can see I've done in the example. And the arguments of those functions are, in case of success, is the data, which is in this case the movies, or error, if there's an error happening here. And imagine if you do not want your fetch to happen on load of the page. let's say you may only want it to be triggered when, for example, user clicks on a button. Triggers in some sort of event. By default, the queries are always active and enabled. If you use this property and set the enabled to false, it'll be disabled until you call it with the refetch function. So it'll only happen when the enabled false if you call the refetch function. And I provide another screenshot to show you how you can use it inside your JSX. So basically, if there is an error with the isError flag, we will show the error message. If not, we will show loading while it's loading. And when it's loaded, we will just map through the data and show the list of movies, as I have done here, which I showed you. So basically, this is what's happening. And I have provided a button here which calls the refetch function, and it refetches the query manually. So if I click on the refetch function, you will see that for a second, this query will turn fresh. It might happen very quickly, but so for a second, it was fresh because it refetched the query again. Now, what happens is that when a page that uses React Query is mounted, it fetches the information, stores it in its cache with the query key that you have provided, and next time you re-navigate to that page, it'll first look for the query key in the cache. If it finds something that corresponds with it, so while it's doing this, it's going to show you the cache data, and then it's going to send a request, and then compare the newly fetched data with your cache. If something's different, then and only then it's going to update your UI. So this is how it eliminates extra re-rendering, which is good in some cases. And this is how we use this information. Now, say React State Management just one more time. Another two options that React Query has that can be pretty useful, but also maybe a little confusing with each other. At least that was the case for me. I thought I would talk about it a little bit. It's called cache time and stale time. So like I explained, when a query happens, it's cached. It's stored in your cache with the query key that you provided, right? So there is a property which you can provide in your configurations object known as cache time. And it tells, basically, it tells the query how long it should remain in the cache before it's garbage collected. So it refers to the value stored inside our cache. And by default, in React Query, it's set to 5 minutes. So if you do not provide it, every 5 minutes, the cache is refreshed. Stale time is a little different. So imagine if you have a specific case where, let's say, the data doesn't change that often. Or even if it does, it's okay for the user to see a little bit, like for a little while, to see like the old previously cached data. It's okay, like it's no big deal. In that case, you may not want to like send a request every time that page is, like you navigate to that page every time that page is mounted. You may only want it to happen like every 1 minute or so. So like when you navigate to that page, it waits for 1 minute. It shows you the cache data, and only after 1 minute it's going to make the request, and then it's going to compare it with the cache. So in this case, you can tell it how long this query can stay stale. It's the term that they use. So it relates to how long your API response is valid. And by default, it's set to 0. So every time, for example here, every time I go to homepage and navigate back to my movies page, it's going to call the movies data again, and it'll be fresh for a second. And if I go back to home and go here, it's going to do the same thing again. But if I state like the stale time, I set it to 1 minute. When I move to home and come back to movies, it's going to wait for 1 minute. It's going to show me the cache data. And after 1 minute, then it's going to send the request and then compare it with the cache. So I hope I said it clearly enough, because it was a little tough to understand for me at the time. And this is how you use it in the code. Basically, you just provide stale time or cache time or both inside the configurations object and set it to milliseconds. Another thing that React Query does that's super useful it was actually, to be honest, the thing that drew me towards it and made me like interested and curious about it. How many of you have ever faced a situation where you'd had to fetch something in an interval, like every 30 seconds in the background? I'm sure quite a number of you. And I'm also sure that you know what a pain it is, because especially when you use it with React, set timeout or set interval causes a lot of side effects. And if you have to, you have to basically control everything yourself, do everything manually. And if in some cases you'd have to stop the timer, reset, you have to do all of that, it's a pain. I know I always look like that when I try to work with it, and you might have to. And when I realized the React query does this for me in a very clean, structured way, and I don't have to bother about all the things that made me so frustrated like that, it was basically the thing that I said, that's it, I'm learning this library. And all you have to do is specify something known as refetch interval inside your configurations object and set it to milliseconds. In this example, it's going to fetch my movies every 3 seconds. That's it. If only I'd known that sooner, right? Now, we may come across cases where we'd have to have multiple queries, multiple fetch requests in one page. And sometimes these fetch requests may be dependent on each other. So let's say you may have to send one request, and you may have to wait until the response is received, and then you have to make the second request. Maybe you need the data from the first one to make the second request. So basically, they have to have a specific order or chained to each other. And if this is the case, basically just using multiple queries, whether they're in a specific order or not, all we have to do is we have to use the useQuery hook separately for each one, with a different key, of course. And if they are dependent on each other, so let's say one of them has to finish, fetch, and then you have to send a request to the second one, you can take advantage of the enabled feature that I explained earlier that tells us if the query should be active and happen now. I will show you how to do it. And obviously, when you have more than one usage of a hook inside a component, you're going to have to alias the data or the is loading or whatever else, whatever other information you're destructuring out of that hook. You have to alias it and name it to something different so they don't get confused with each other. As you can see in this code, I'm fetching two queries. One of them is fetching a list of movies. The other one is fetching a list of cartoons. Yes, I love cartoons. I have aliased the data. For movies, I've called it movies data. And for the loading, I've called it the movies loading. And I've done the same thing for the cartoons, so they don't get confused with each other. And so I've imagined that first I have to fetch the list of movies, and once the movies is fetched, then it should send another request and fetch the list of cartoons. So what I've told it is that you should only be enabled when you have the movies data available, and I've turned it into a Boolean, so it'll know. This is how we can chain the fetch requests to each other. And if you want to use it in your code, it's basically the same way as before. So you will just show your movies loading, and then it shows like an indicator that movie's loading. Once it's there, it's going to map through it and show you the name of all the movies, and it's going to do the same for the cartoons. The only difference is you'll probably see the cartoons loading spin a little longer because first it's waiting for this one to finish. And that's how it goes. So it's not very difficult to understand, I would say. Do we have any questions? Sure, yes. Yes? Are you talking about destructuring the data out of the hook? Yeah, you can do that as well. No, actually, it's just a matter of how you want to use it or how you're comfortable. So it's basically, I would say, a matter of preference. That was it. Do you have any other questions? Yes. Yes. That's actually a very good question. So React Query provides us, if you remember, I don't know how many of you were paying attention, but in the beginning of the presentation, I said that the query key can be a string or an array. So if we have something that we want to pass as parameters into the query, we can use it as an array. I will show you the code in my own example here. So I've called it paginated movies. So as you can see, I'm using useQueryHook. I'm fetching movies, but I'm going to do it with pagination. And as you can see, the key of my query is called movies paginated data. And I'm passing in two states, which is the page number and the limit, inside the array that's the query key. So what happens is the useQueryHook, by default, is programmed in a way that it's subscribed to any variables, they call these variables, that are placed inside your array of query key. And every time you set these states, the useQueryHook automatically calls itself again. And it doesn't matter if you're using an interval. Like, for example, let's say here, I have the preview here for you. So I'm calling the movies with a limit of 5 on page 1. So if I want to go to the next page and show, like, let's say 2 at a time. So what it does is, even if it's in an interval, let's say I subscribe it and I put the interval to happen every 10 seconds. If it's 5 seconds into, like, the timer, and I suddenly change the parameter and make it, okay, show me, like, I don't know, the previous page, it will automatically stop its timer, update the parameters, because on click of these buttons, I'm setting these states again, as you can see in my code here. So when we have the limit buttons that shows us, like, how many per page we want to see, they set the limit. And when we have the buttons that goes previous or next page, we just set the page number, basically. And this state is passed into the useQueryHook in the useQuery key. And when you use your fetch function, they come in as arguments here, and they're placed inside your query parameters, inside your fetch function. So even if you're using it as an interval, it automatically stops the timer, updates the parameters, calls it again, and restarts its timer. So that was exactly another good point, because it does all of this for you. You don't have to do it yourself. Well, I haven't gone that far, but we can try and see how it goes. But it was much simpler than when I had to implement it myself. So I would say that at least maybe they probably did a better job than me in handling some of its side effects and everything. And thank you all for your attention. Thank you all for being here. And you're all awesome.
Yes, please. Thank you, Sadaf, as well, for
you.
doing this presentation and for giving us this great talk. And thank you, audience, for being so engaged and for all your questions. Now let's continue. Let's continue chatting and talking near the pizza, right? And the corner. Thank you.